Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll call this meeting of the Woodford County Fiscal Court's Budget and Finance Committee to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Squire Taylor. Squire Varner.
Here.
Squire Carl. Here. Judge Executive Day.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Squire Gill, you want to just test your mic and make sure we can hear you and you can hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We got you. Thank you. All right. We'll start out with the 2026 county clerk's budget. No, I don't mind at all. I just had 1A and 1B on there, so we'll put in the Woodford County Sheriff's Office 2026 budget. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff, for being here.
So, the 2026 budget.
You mind to turn on your mic, Mr. Sheriff, please, sir? Thank you.
Our 2026 budget is $1,532,569.71, and that would be an increase of $32,845.13. There's only really 10 line items in the budget that are going to be changed, that have changed, and they changed in July when you all gave us the pay raise.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And that's pretty much the same thing. That's just from July to now, and then everything else is pretty much the same.
And so
I could go down each line item if you want me to, or.
Well, let me ask the members of the committee, do you all have any questions or specific questions about any of the line items that have been proposed? And so, Mr. Sheriff, essentially this is a continuation budget.
Yes, from July.
Yes. Squire Gill, do you have any questions or comments regarding the budget?
No, I don't.
Thank you. So we've had several weeks to discuss this and look at it, and everybody's had the opportunity to meet with the sheriff and discuss with him and his office the changes in the budget. Any other questions or comments regarding the sheriff's proposed 2026 budget? Seeing none.
That was
Mr.
easy.
Sheriff? Let me go ahead and ask for a motion from the committee to recommend to the full fiscal court the approval of the 2026 annual budget for the Woodford County Sheriff's Office and to authorize the judge executive to sign any and all documents related thereto. Motion by Squire Kelly Carl. Second by Squire Darrell Varner. Are there any questions again on the budget? Seeing none, all those in favor on the committee of recommending full approval to the fiscal court, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. I also need to get a recommendation on the approval of the annual order allowance for the sheriff's office. Motion by Squire Carl, second by Squire Varner. All those in favor, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That motion also carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And thank you to Amber and your team in your office that helped work on the budget. Thank you. Yes, sir. Madam Clerk?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome. Okay, so I have taken the figures all the figures that I was given from HR and plugged them in for some of the increases. The largest increases had to do with medical. I can go through and itemize what actually was an increase if you would like, or address it however your questions, or whatever you'd like for me to propose.
So, thank you, Madam Clerk, for timely submitting your budget and having that before us. And I know we've had the opportunity to kind of go over it. So for the majority of the budget, my understanding is it's a continuation budget. But do you want to talk about any of the line items that are not related to personnel that may have increased or, and for whatever reason?
Sure. Like I had mentioned, well, my total budget is $1,202,705.59. I've got an increase in our insurance, health, life, and dental, all that. That was an increase of $23,000. We have a contract with our vendor, software management, that does our hardware software. That was a $2,000 increase. Postage, that kind of got us a little bit because our plate fees increased a lot. That was a $5,000. We've never had to increase my postage line that much in the past. Over time, I've got that increased double because we've got 2 elections coming up in 2026. Very much needed there. Other than that, that's the only outstanding. Everything else was pretty much a carry forward as an operational expenses.
Excellent, excellent. It's pretty much a continuation budget. It is a continuation budget. And let me ask members of the committee, do you have any questions for the clerk? Squire Gill, do you have any questions for the clerk?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, and again, we've had this before us for a while, and we always work through it and work with the constitutional officers to discuss the budget in the in-between time before court so that we're prepared. I feel like everybody's prepared. And so may I have a motion to approve to the annual budget of 2026 for the Woodford County Clerk's Office as presented to authorize the judge executive to sign any and all documents related thereto. Motion by Squire Carl, second by Squire Varner. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote and signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. And that motion carries. We also need a motion for the recommendation of the approval of the annual order.
Motion.
Squire Taylor and a second by Squire Carl. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That motion carries unanimously. Great job, Madam Clerk.
Very good. Thank you so much. Do we have a moment for me to talk about a digital access project that's very exciting?
Yes, yes, please. And that would fit right in our budget and finance items, other related matters.
Since we went through so hurriedly, I was going to wait and see if we had time, but I'm really excited about this program. It was presented to us by the Fayette County Clerk at our last meeting that we had. We had a clerks meeting conference last week, and they have been carrying on this project since 2023. I would like at some point, if we get to the point where we get this underground, to let you all hear a little bit about the 2 founders of this program so you all can equally be as excited as I am about it. It goes back to, it stemmed from a collaborative partnership effort between UK for Black Studies, Central Kentucky Slavery Initiative, the Lexington Black Prosperity Initiative. Fayette County's office went in with the Lexington Urban County Government, Bluegrass Community. They had all kinds of foundations that helped fund this. This project, it's been able, the project in itself is amazing that they have been able to go in and go back to our first deed of 1776 and get it all scanned so it will meet up to where we have scanned back to, which is 1965. We had a law that we had to comply with last year. We met the first to go back 30 years in all of our scans to make sure that all of our documents were digitalized up to 30 years. Then we have until this coming June to go back 60 years. We've already met that. I've got a substantial amount of funding in grant funds. So in addition to that, Kenton County Clerk has indicated to me that we would be able to use their special scanner that we have. You know, the big books that we have that's all in cursive writing. You can't just take some of those apart, so you have to use a certain scanner that's pretty pricey. But when we get through with it, we'll get that certain staff that's been as instrumental for Fayette County as it would be for us. Hopefully it will be maybe some students from Midway University. We can get some retired people that come in, our historians that come in to help us. We have money to fund them to pay for this, just like Fayette County did. It's just a hidden treasure with all kinds of wealth of historic facts. Kentucky's most primary people and places from 1780 up to 2025 would all be revealed. Fayette County desperately wants us to be a part of it because, as you know, we only had 3 counties in the state, you know, Lincoln, Jefferson, and Fayette. So we were part of Fayette County. They go back in their records and they find, you know, with Daniel Boone and Henry Clay. We had a request today from Cassius Clay, one of our old deeds. So it's coming, and they need our information to help them with all of their ancestry and all their history that they have. So we'll be collaborating with Fayette County, so we won't be left behind. We're going to have all of our records from the very first deed all the way through, so it will be in real time. It's called a Digital Access Project, DAP, and it's just so exciting to hear what they have accomplished and the interesting people that they have pulled in on it. So we can use it as not just a project that we say we want to get finished. We're going to use it as a piece of history that we're going to leave here, so anybody who's interested can get online and see anything that they want to see about Woodford County from 1700s up. So I'll keep you all informed as this progresses, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of the details, but when we get the scanner and when we get things in place, I just like to periodically make reports. I'll be asking for your permission to spend the funding money and the grants that I have set aside. We've got almost $200,000 here, so it's not going to be a project that's going to deplete anything with the county. It's funds that I would like to see for preservation of the records.
Madam Clerk, if I could ask a question or two. This will also, for extensive title search, complicated title searches, it'll help provide more digitized resources for people to go back further, correct?
Correct, yes.
So it'll help not only with the historical aspect, but even in property conveyances and transfers and that sort of thing, especially farms.
Yes, absolutely. It will help Fayette County. Well, when we do get ours completed up close to where they are, it will just be like central Kentucky at that point, where it will help, will be a piece of the puzzle that will help everybody.
Would you like us to go ahead and give a preliminary motion for you to proceed with that project, to recommend that to the full fiscal court?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion for same?
Absolutely.
Motion by Squire Carl, second by Squire Varner. Are there any questions or comments about the program? That's why you're the best clerk in Kentucky. All those in favor, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other items to come before the Budget and Finance Committee? Anybody else have any item to discuss? Madam Clerk, did you get that motion? Yes. All right. Seeing no other items to come before the Woodford County Fiscal Court's Budget and Finance Committee in approving both the County Clerk and Sheriff's Office calendar year budgets for 2026, we will deem that meeting adjourned. Let the record reflect the meeting is adjourned. And I will call to order the Ordinance Committee. This is the Woodford County Fiscal Court's Ordinance Committee. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Squire Downey. Squire Blackford.
Present.
Squire Gill.
Here.
Judge Executive Kim.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. We may be waiting on Squire Downey, I'm not sure. But what I'll do is, let me first take the Laurelland County Road System proposed first reading of that ordinance, Squire Brown. We are working with our road department to get the details of that road. And once we have that, we'll have that to the county attorney, and that'll be ready very likely for our January meeting. So there's, just with the transition from Supervisor Wilson to our current situation and 2 snowstorms, we're gonna have that ready for the first meeting in January 13th. The second item is the addressing ordinance, and I want to thank our mapping and GIS director, Mr. Kenneth Johns, for working on that ordinance. My goal was to take that up after the text amendment Articles 2 and 7 discussion, but since Squire Downey is, we're checking on his status, and that is a somewhat of a less priority issue, I will go ahead and discuss that in his absence. So, Director Johns, do you want to just kind of give a brief, you sent a great email and overview and summary to the court. You want to give a brief overview of the addressing ordinance? And we'll get into the questions that you still have after that.
Sure. Like I said, when I asked you all if we could take this up with the county attorney and have him prepare an addressing ordinance, the addressing ordinance that we currently use in Woodford County, Versailles, and Midway is extremely dated. Since Alan doesn't like the word antiquated, I would like to replace those 3 ordinances with this single ordinance and attempt to get the court and the 2 city councils all to approve the same ordinance so that everybody's on the same page. The 3 existing ordinances that we currently have are similar but different at the same time. They all have different penalties and fees, or fines, I mean to say. And they don't really represent the current climate of addressing as it relates to the 911 office, the dispatch center, and what's called NG 911, Next Generation 911. This address, like I said in the email, is put together using current NENA standards. It is put together with or taking into consideration ordinances that we have in counties around us, Lexington, Jessamine County, Scott County, and then I also leaned on some coworkers to get some out-of-state 911 addressing ordinances to reference those as well. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And the county attorney is correct. This ordinance does do a lot, but it's actually pretty straightforward from my chair. It will help provide documentation when addresses need to be changed. I can say this is why your address is getting changed. This will help prevent situations like we had in at Rose Lane. I could very easily say we're going to do this because this is what the governing bodies have already decided, and things like that. But yeah, that's pretty much my goal.
I appreciate that summary, Director Johns. And so, share with the members of the committee and the court the decision points and action points that you're looking for in the review of things that we don't have ready. So I know the fines, that sort of thing. You want to kind of go through those?
Yeah. So in terms of fines, an ordinance like this doesn't really have any teeth if it doesn't have anything to say you got to do this or else. But I have absolutely no idea what the court would want that to look like. As a matter of fact, don't even really have a place to start. The 3 ordinances that we have, like I said, range anywhere from up to $100,000 in the city of Versailles to a minimum of $25 at the city of Midway. So it's really all over the place. If we chose to,
So as a practical matter, how would someone be fined $100,000 for an addressing violation?
have absolutely no idea. So in Lexington, in LFUCG, from what I understand, and I could be dated on this, and they might have changed it, but the way that I understood it was you would get a warning or two. They would fine you X amount of dollars, and then they would put a lien on your property until you had your addresses posted correctly to their ordinance. In LFUCG, they have an addressing office. That office does nothing but deal with addresses day in and day out. They assign them. They drive around and they look for them. They make sure people have them correct. Woodford County, at the moment, does not have that kind of manpower. Don't know what you all would like to have in that situation. That's kind of why I left it open-ended. I think that there probably should be something, but it should be reasonable. It would not be my goal to have this ordinance passed and then drive around and just throwing out fines to people, because that's not really what I want to do. I just want people to, make it easier for our emergency services vehicles and such to find them when they need it.
And Director Johns, Squire Blackford has a question. I was going to ask, for the city of Versailles and Midway, our goal would be for them to repeal their current ordinances and adopt something similar along these lines?
Yes, I sent an email to them the other day. Mayor Vandegrift was out of town, so he did not reply to it, but he has replied to a few texts that I've sent where he feels like that the city of Midway would very much be on board. And then I did get a response from Mayor Dake to my email, and she also felt like the city of Versailles would be supportive.
Squire Blackford, sir.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Judge. Do you have any idea, you talking about the fines for the new change of address? Was it physically impossible or too hard, what they have to do in there? You're talking about, you're talking about the amount of fines, the range of fines. What's the hardest thing physically they may have to do in order to keep them getting fined, in order to do it physically, what they want to get fined? Is there anything, do you have any idea of what is required of them to follow the rules or whatever?
No, the rules are pretty simple.
Yeah.
You take a 3-inch or better reflective number and you post it on your house in a location that can be seen from any approaching emergency services vehicle. That's reflective. In terms of street names, that's just make sure that it really doesn't, that the finding and everything doesn't really have anything to do with street naming, etc. Even though street naming is part of the ordinance. It's not just numbers on houses. It's also the naming of streets and how that might, how those come to fruition as well. I believe it's fairly simple to follow the. And again, it wouldn't be to necessarily go out and just find people to fine. That's not the goal. It would be a moving forward situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Squire Blackford. I know that, Director Johns, we've talked about maybe in instances where we want people to properly address, and maybe there's a whole group of a neighborhood or something that we'd look at incentivizing that in some sort of way. This would be outside of the ordinance, but we've talked about that before with the Rose Lane discussion. Let me ask, other questions or comments from the committee? I think it might be good, Director Johns, for me to have a conversation with the mayors to see on their, since we do have this big discrepancy in what their current ordinances read, what they'd like to see. You know what the fine structure is, and you've touched on it, but in Fayette County?
I can get a very more specific.
Okay.
I can reach out to my counterpart there. for that. I could also do the same for Jessamine County. I know that individual.
That'd be great. Give us a few similar jurisdictions to compare. That'd be great. Yes, Mr. County Attorney, sir.
Judge, first I want to commend Kenneth for the work he's done on this. As I had indicated, and he's correct, I said there's a lot here. Our original ordinance from 27 years ago is 3 pages. The cities are going different directions. We go in a direction different than them. Cities more typically do civil fines. We historically, as a county, have more traditionally done a criminal penalty. I noticed, Kenneth, there was some thought maybe that if it's a civil fine, if collected, it could go to the 911 board, maybe to offset contributions, that sort of. I mean, these are all just thoughts. And my concern is, first of all, this has to be your all's ordinance. Kenneth is doing a ton of legwork for you if you want to pursue this, but it has to be in the way you want it to be, and that means it's not mine either. I might have thoughts about the penalty and so forth. I certainly have a thought it shouldn't be up to $100,000. And do you want it to be civil? Do you want to consider, if it is civil, you have a board that hears these and assesses the fine? Do you want it to be the whole court or an offshoot or a committee of the court? I don't know. And again, these are certain thoughts you have to have. And my concern is, and the judge touched upon it just now, and that's what I agree with, I don't want to do something this massive, send it to them, and they might say, well, we'd rather go this way. If we can try to get some consensus in a general sense as to what they want, I think we can take the lead on first adopting it. One of the main things that has to be addressed, and Kenneth put together this street addressing guide, the Woodford County Versailles Midway Addressing Guide, which is more comprehensive and longer than the actual ordinance would be. Mm-hmm. And your thought, I believe, Kenneth, was to kind of make it like an addendum. I view this as something like a regulation when a statute is passed by the legislature to expand upon that or to answer questions raised by that. But I also wonder how they might want to approach that. Is this something that we simply adopt, say by interlocal agreement, this shall be the addressing guide for all of Woodford County, and reference it in an ordinance, simply reference it? Do they want to just make it incorporated into the ordinance? I don't know. But again, it would be strange to have something that we simply incorporate longer than what the actual ordinance is. So, but this is critical to that, would you not?
It definitely expands on.
And again, Kenneth is the expert on all of this, and I'm not going to challenge or question any of that. I'm just pointing out that it is rather comprehensive. So I think this is all a good idea. It does raise a number of questions that we need to have addressed by all 3 bodies and hopefully have a consensus, as I said, in that regard, and then we can go forward. I did see the email from Mayor Dake, and I like how she put it. This is my inflection. The new ordinance is certainly a lot more comprehensive than what each government entity currently has. And that gets to my point is, we have our 3-page ordinance and they have their very short ordinances, and we're about to go embark upon this. So I want to make sure that we don't grind it to a halt if we put all this work into it and then we find out, no, that's not close to what they're interested in. So let's see. They've got it because you sent it to all of them. If they have any parts of it that they may find objectionable or they'd rather not pursue, just to get some idea of where they stand, how they might like to approach the fine aspect of it. Would it be a board within each governmental body that does that? I don't know. But, again, there is a lot here, so this is not like the Larland acceptance into the county road system ordinance that I can just whip out like that. So you all, I think, again, need to really take a deep dive into this, make sure this is what you want. I need your thoughts, your opinions as to how you would see certain of the blanks filled in rather than me just filling them in. And then we go from there, Judge.
I think that's a good way to proceed. Do any members of the committee have any questions or comments? Seeing none. Director Johns?
Thank you.
Thank you. We will continue to move forward on that. Hopefully, we'll have some progress to report by either our bill pay meeting or the first meeting of the year. Moving on to the main topic, Madam Clerk, you said that Squire Downey is tied up with some work obligations and isn't able to get away. So we'll move on with the Planning and Zoning Text Amendment Articles 2 and 7. And I would invite Director Steve Hunter to come up and get ready. And as he does that, I'm going to take a brief recess. If you don't mind to turn on the mic, and please proceed, Director Hunter. Thank you, sir.
Is that on, Jordan, on just one screen?
It's all three.
All right. So, text amendment here. You guys got a ton of paperwork, I think, already. So, what I've got, well, I'm going to have to slide this up because, Judge, I'm going to have to navigate this.
Do whatever you need to do.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let's do that. And before we get too far, just so you all see, this is my actual file right here. I'm going to try to send this down a little bit. So the text amendment's back to the fiscal court. It's very similar to what you saw a year ago, and I just want to, what's up on the screen, the Planning Commission went over this for about 7 months, through 7 different months of public hearings. And this is the PowerPoint that I used at the Planning Commission. It was a lot longer. It was about 119 pages. I scaled this back to about 50-some pages. And I'm not going through all of it. It's just kind of, it's in here for a reason. I think it's kind of, I need to walk you all through a few things, and we'll just get in the text amendment here. But I want to point out that the text amendment, and this was mentioned to the Planning Commission, the reason that slide's on the screen right there about the comprehensive plan, this all started in the spring of '23 when we went out and we talked about, right after I got hired, I think the goal was we need to get this comprehensive plan updated for our community, and we went out, we hired the Kentucky League of Cities to help us with a public engagement project, and we went in '23 to 4 places in the county to talk about the comprehensive plan. And we went out and did that. We got a lot of feedback about a lot of stuff, comments. There was an interactive meeting with several, or a few hundred citizens showed up. And this started back in '23 with comprehensive plan discussion about where do we go with the comprehensive plan, and that dominoed down to what eventually got to the in-family conveyance verbiage. And then this agenda is up there on the screen for a reason from '23, because in the summer after we did the comprehensive plan project, we also then started on the goals and objectives. And in the fall of '23, coordinating with Kenneth at that time, the Planning Commission did a parcel analysis report. That's what's highlighted in yellow. Again, some of the stuff's hard to see, but I'm just generally going to give you a timeline on how we got to the point we're at. So in September of '23, the Planning Commission started looking at parcels and data and blah, blah, blah. This was the basis of that. There was a 2016 base parcel map, 23 parcel map, and we started to look at the parcels, and it became real apparent that the county was being subdivided, the county was growing. We just got the census data. All these things were coming together at one time, and we could see where the city was growing, where the county was growing. But it was the parcels that sort of, these two maps are what kind of got this whole discussion started with. It was very obvious. You could see we were creating small lots, the big farms were getting cut up, and where they were happening in the county. Again, this happened in '23. And then the Planning Commission dominoed that down to the in-family conveyance policy and started looking at the number of in-family conveyances that had happened over a number of years. In October, that's the agenda on the left, the Planning Commission continued that discussion, and that morphed into the moratorium request that we made to the Fiscal Court almost 2 years to the day, here we are in December, where the Planning Commission requested a moratorium on rural land division while we could work on the comprehensive plan. And at the same time, those other 2 pages there came from your Ag Review Board. They sort of piggybacked on the comprehensive plan discussion that the Planning Commission started. They met and reviewed some of the data, and they wrote you guys a letter in October of '23 requesting basically the same thing, that there be a moratorium enacted so we could review the policies of Woodford County as they relate to land division. Won't get into the details there, but the stuff on the right-hand side, that top paragraph, they basically said the Ag Review Board made a determination that several of the policies that were established in the early 1990s related to in-family conveyances, rural subdivisions, basically their intended purposes were clear. They hadn't met their mark. Simply by the number of parcels that have been developed, the number of homes have been constructed. The goal of that 1990 change when we went from 5 acres to 30 and all that kind of stuff was to preserve farmland. And at the end of the day, we continue to cut up farmland. So that came to you guys in '24. That brings us then, almost a year later, after all that discussion about the moratorium, if you remember, we brought that to you and you all said, hey, try to figure out the problem and bring us back a solution. That's kind of generally what we got in '23. So the Planning Commission worked on that in '24 through their committee process, as well as working on the goals and objectives. And as you remember, a year ago in '24, we did a text amendment and we sent it to you guys in December of '24. That was on December 19th. That text amendment was related to Articles 2 and 7. It's exactly what you have now, minus a couple little changes. And at that time, what's highlighted on that screen up there on the right, if you remember, we sent you an exception policy where you could create 1 or 2 lots. And basically, at the end of the day, this whole text amendment to Articles 2 and 4, there wasn't a lot of discussion except for that highlighted paragraph. And at that point, as you all, I'm sure, recall, we gave you some data. That's an email from me to the court in March. And if you guys remember, at the end of the day, the text amendment was rejected in the spring of '24. And you all had some discussion about what the in-family conveyance policy should be comprised of. And that's that document on the screen. That's what came from the fiscal court back to my office. And it says April 20 something. I can't see it real good up there. April 23rd, maybe, something like that, of this year, is when the text amendment was rejected and you guys told us to go back to the wood shop and take a beating or work on something. I forget what the directive was, but we went back to the workshop. That's what we did, wood shop, whatever. And so that's what these slides were here. And this was for the Planning Commission. So from May through September, we worked on that text amendment. And then we had our advisory committee. If you're not familiar with that, that is the working committee of the Planning Commission. 5 of the 9 planning commissioners have a committee where they look at these documents. And we got the directive on the 23rd. We had a committee meeting by May 1st. We then introduced this into a public hearing in May, but we went back to the advisory committee 2 times around Labor Day on some city side issues. But we had a public hearing on this exact same text amendment in the months of May, June, July, August, September. Meant to do October, but the Woodford Sun did something with the ad, so we couldn't have the hearing, and then we voted in November. So we had a 6-month public hearing where every single month we would open the hearing, ask citizens if they want to comment on the proposal. Some did comment. That's why you guys have a very thick record that came with the text amendment. And then we would table the hearing to the next month. So we sort of roadshowed this thing for 6 straight months on the text amendment. So that then brings us to the actual text amendment, and I promise I'm going to go even faster. And I'm doing it on purpose because I want you guys to have time to answer questions. The first part of the text amendment does relate to Article 2, and as is the definition chapter. It is slightly different than you saw a year ago, and I'll explain why. There is actually 19, and this is a summary of your text amendment. You guys haven't seen this, but this is how I presented it to the Planning Commission. Instead of reading every page, I just did bullets of the highlights of what's in the articles. But the interesting thing about Article 2, as we kind of continue to work, and it's a housekeeping exercise, there's actually 19 definitions we've added that need to match state laws. We have definitions that didn't match KRS's. Like, for example, the word development plan is a KRS 100 definition. We didn't have it in our book. You know, stuff related to manufactured homes. In fact, that's one of the bullets you see in red right there. There's been a new House bill that was passed that goes into effect July 26 related to manufactured homes. Qualified, KRS 100 348's been amended. We have to treat manufactured homes differently come July of 2006. It's kind of like a no discrimination clause that goes into effect. Manufactured homes are, starting July, have to be allowed anywhere you stick build a house. You no longer can discriminate against manufactured homes. You can't legislate them out in your zoning ordinance, and you can't push them into certain zones. So we had to get those definitions right. And by the way, that's some of the stuff that's in this text amendment that has been all along because we knew that was coming. We already passed the policy about medical cannabis and solar farms, but we didn't have the definitions in 2. Residential care facilities, a requirement in 10982. We didn't have it in Chapter 2. We didn't have a definition of truck stop in there, and we're deleting some definitions. The family member had to be revised because of the in-family. So Chapter 2 has a lot of red in it because several definitions had to have some housekeeping exercises and had to be cleaned up for some state laws as we continue to look at that very old chapter. So that brings us to Chapter 7, where all the kind of, like was been mentioned, the kind of main event stuff here we're talking about. Everything in Chapter 7 is exactly as it was 1 year ago, except for 1 page. It's the same exact text amendment, what we're doing in Chapter 7. One of the things we're doing that we presented last year, again, that everyone kind of didn't have any questions about, the A2 zone right now, there's only 51 parcels that you see up there on Kenneth. By the way, Kenneth did new maps for us for 25, and I'm going to explain that in a second. But we looked at maps at one point in 23, a year ago in 24, then we looked at them again in the fall of this year, just to make sure that where the data's at. One of the things we're doing is proposing to convert those 50 A2 parcels back to A1. Because right now when you go to the A2 zone, it tells you go look at the A1. There's nothing you can do in A2 that's not allowed in A1. It literally tells you go look at the other page. The A2 zone is used as what we call a hop and a skip to a rural residential zoning. You technically zone from A1 to A2 and then go to RR. And there ends up being residual pieces that you see right there, and there's only 51 of them, and they average pretty big. And the plan is just to convert those back to ag and then move forward with just an ag policies, RR policies, CO policies, and A4 policies. So that was in last year's proposal too. I don't think you guys saw the maps, and this is the first time you're seeing the maps integrated into the text summary. The A1 zone's next. The A1 zone, again, right to farm policy. You all saw it a year ago. We delete tourist destination. housekeeping for swimming pools, solar panels, and of course the in-family conveyance issue is in this chapter. If you remember a year ago, in the spring, the fiscal court took 2 votes. You guys voted 6-2 to send us that directive of the in-family, and then you voted 7-1 to make it a conditional use permit and asked the planning commission to figure out how to make it be a conditional use permit as a precursor before you go to the platting step of the in-family, and we did that. And of course, we're adding accessory dwellings. That was in the last year's proposal too, and we're changing the lot width standard to get rid of odd-shaped lots. This is the lot width standard that you guys saw a year ago, and if you recall, right now the way the lot width is established in the rural zone is it's at the building line, which the developer or property owner chooses where that is, and when you do that, you end up with lots that look like this. That's why we have these weird shaped lots, because the developer establishes the lot width basically where they're going to build. What we're doing in the text amendment is we're establishing the lot width at the setback line, which means you'll never have odd shaped lots. They'll be more rectangular in shape. You'll go from your frontage to your lot width to your building line.
Looks like a congressional district.
Those are interesting properties. If you can imagine the one on the left trying to mow the fence line or put a fence up or doing your wireless dog fence or whatever. But that is, our ordinance being dated are encouraging these type of lot shapes because we're letting the lot width, so you have to have 150 foot of frontage, but then the lot width of 200 is established at the building line. So if you push your building line back 2,000 feet, you go from 150 to 25 and you widen out. If you put the lot width at the setback line, you go from 150 to 200 and then you widen out to whatever. It's a simple fix in the ordinance just to make the lot width at the setback first building. And we won't have that issue going forward. And then again, we added accessory building standards, signage standards for CUPs. We currently have none. And then we had the in-family conveyance verbiage. In looking at it in this last amendment, again, time has now gone over 2 years. We now have several maps, and those are all 4 of them side by side. And by the way, we don't want to boost Kenneth's egos here, but that's like a piece of art up there if you guys look at it. That's something that I'd put on my wall. I love maps, and that's what planning is. And to see those 4 maps side by side, you can't read anything, I get it, but just look at the colors, look at the way the lots, you can literally visualize where the cuts have been. And then, of course, the numbers are there that support what has gone where. You can see the one farm that we have left that's 1,000 acres or more. We only have one of them, and you can clearly see it right there, which is the UK farm. You can see the urban service boundary and whatnot. So again, I appreciate these maps, appreciate what Kenneth's doing, because these are visual, and these things help us understand these trends. But here's the 2 maps side by side that I think the Planning Commission discussed, and it's something the court needs to think about when we talk about in-family conveyances, rural land cuts. So in 2016, you can see the parcel layer there, and I got to get to mine so I can read it. We have gone, at that time, 2016 to 2025, the parcel layer has grown by 194 parcels. Now, people can argue with me or argue with the data and say, hey, the in-families aren't playing a role. They are playing a role, but there's been 194 new parcels from point to point, and you can look at those, and 87 of those are less than 5 acres. So they either did them by way of an in-family, or they did them by a rural residential, which we didn't have hardly any, or A4 development, and there's been 14 of those. There's been 85 that were created 5 to 30 acres. So if you think about the ag zone as a 30-acre zone, there's been 197 cuts. The majority of them are less than the ag minimum. And that's what that data shows with those 2 arrows. It also is interesting if you really dig down in the data. In 2016, we had 293 farms over 100 acres. There's now 283. So what's happening is the small farms are getting cut up into smaller lots. The big farms are getting cut into 30s. And so it's all occurring. And if you look at the math right there, we have 10 less 100-acre farms over that time frame, and we got more 30-acre tracts because big farms go into 30s and small farms by way of in-family, rural residential, or A4 go into less than 5s. So there's the data. Doesn't look like a big deal. It's only 200 lots, but it's 200 lots in a county that has an urban service boundary concept, policies that say we don't develop in the rural area, and a 30-acre minimum. And we're cutting off small lots every single year. This brings us to this page right here, which is the center of what you all want to talk about. This is the in-family conveyance policy. Again, we got a directive from the court, and I say directive, but it wasn't a hard directive. It was more, hey, here's what we prefer the verbiage to say. You guys go back and kind of study it, fit it in the ordinance, have a public hearing, see where it kind of shakes out. If you remember, you guys had 8 bullets. One of the bullets you all had was a residency requirement. The Planning Commission struck that standard. Not that it's a good idea that someone has to be a Woodford County resident to do it in family, but as we looked at some deeds, you could, you think it's mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, and they're conveying to their kid. But it turns out there's a lot of partnerships on deeds. There's brothers on deeds. There's dads and sons on deeds. And the dad lives in Woodford County, but the son lives in Jessamine County. So how do you handle the residency requirement when you got 2 people on the deed and this one doesn't live here and this one does live here? Planning Commission just struck the residency requirement. It'd be hard to manage. It'd be hard to figure out why this guy gets an in-family and this one doesn't when basically one person's on the deed that doesn't live here and 2 are. The rest of that almost reads just like you guys sent it to us. It's 1 or 2 cuts, 2-acre minimum. One of the big changes, though, they did make is, if you remember, you all recommended to be a 10-year hold on the parent track and a 10-year hold on the conveyed track. They changed that to 5 and 10. And the reasoning on that was they thought, well, the parent track that's being conveyed from, probably going to be the parents or the grandparents, and they might be older. And to make them hold the property for 10 years seemed a little bit cumbersome or maybe tough. For example, if someone needed to sell the farm to go into a nursing home or some reason, a 10-year hold on someone that was kind of further on up in their age, they just thought seemed like a pretty big burden. They also thought that as long as we're putting a hold on the parent track and the other, you'll deal with this loophole problem that we have. So they changed it from a 10-year hold and 10-year hold to a 5 and 10. The other 2 things in yellow are basically to clarify judicial action was mentioned, and we wanted to talk about substantial hardships. Again, there was some discussion at the Planning Commission, again, if mom needs to go into a nursing home and it's not a court action, but she needs to sell the farm, there should be a hardship exemption where someone can sell that farm if they just got to get out from underneath it. So to put a 10-year hold through the in-family conveyance and say, I can never sell my farm for 10 years, there's just situations, a bankruptcy would be a court action, but there are other times you just need to sell the property. So the Planning Commission added pursuant to court order or arising from a substantial hardship, just to give us some wiggle room. And really, that's the only change to the in-family. Everything else is exactly as you all sent it to us. And then I'm going to rip on through this even faster. As you know, we did sort of our doomsday scenario where with the existing rules right now, and we did it a year ago. So right now, the way the parcels lay, if everyone could do what they're allowed to do, 2, 4, 7, or 15 lots, there could be 8,100 more parcels created in this county. With the provision that you all sent us, that brings it down to 1,400 parcels. A year ago, that number was 800. The reason why it's higher is, if you remember, you guys have dropped the floor a little bit. Our proposal a year ago from the Planning Commission was 50 acres and above qualifies you. That dropped down to 32 acres. And then the 50 acres and above got more cuts than was proposed a year ago. So it's about 600 more lots in kind of the worst case scenario than a year ago, because more people would be eligible under this proposal. But that just shows you, again, it's not likely we're getting 8,000 lots, but in theory, those parcels can do those cuts. In theory, we could see several thousand more parcels cut in this county if we keep the existing policy. And then we got into the CO zone. Won't get into that quite a bit. The CO is exactly as you remember. Again, Kenneth's got us a new map. One of the things, if you remember from a year ago, was to take the CO zone back from 30 to 5, because that's what the parcels are now. We got a lot of non-conforming parcels. We just dealt with that in the flood this year. And if you look at the actual data, there's only 600 CO parcels. Some are split zone, but the ones that are truly CO, there's only 637. 522 of those are less than 30 acres, with the majority being less than 5. So one of the fixes of the CO zone, and by the way, you can see real visual on the map where those are, along the river, things like that. They're already 1 acre tracts and 2 acre tracts and 5 acre tracts. The fact that when we made it 30 acres, we made all those properties non-conforming, and it's just problematic. So the CO zone to clean up is to take it back to a 5 acre division, because that's what they are now. And that's something we talked about a year ago, Planning Commission looked at. No one came and testified that that was problematic, because it's just housekeeping. The rural residential zone, we're almost done here, was to take it, change it, keep the 80-20, but we would make the 1 acre minimums of 2, and we would cap the lots from 15 to 10. That's the same proposal you heard a year ago. There's where that lies on that page. That's section 703.11. So the RR zone, you still could do them. You still follow the comprehensive plan where you can do them, but you no longer can do 15 lots. You can only do 10, and they have to be 2 acre minimums. You still have to put 80% of the land in the conservation or residual farm area. And then the last thing is the A4 zone that we all kind of know and love, the small community zone. The plan for the small community zone, as you all know, is 2 things. There's the small community map. One of the challenges with the small community zone in the zoning ordinance is there is a meets and bounds description that number one is not accurate, but it describes those radiuses in the zoning ordinance. And one of the things the Planning Commission like to do when we ever get to the comprehensive plan is to redefine those radiuses where they're just not, they're exactly a 1 mile radius or a bigger radius, and they split parcels, and they're not sometimes representative of what the community is, for example, in Millville or maybe in Nonesuch. So the idea was to take the definition of the size out of the zoning ordinance so we could define them in the comprehensive plan based on what the community really is. The other thing in the A4 zone was to add some extra CUPs. For example, we're getting sewer to Millville, and if down the road they could have a small restaurant or a daycare, small healthcare clinic. The idea was to put some other CUPs into play for those small historic communities, besides, for example, just a convenience store. So the A4 change was to add accessory dwellings, add some CUP options, and basically figure out the footprints of them down the road when the comprehensive plan is ever done. And that's the map that shows the small communities. We won't get into that. And I'm going to finish up with this. One thing Kenneth and I have been working on, and just want to point this out to you guys. This Thursday at 10 o'clock, we're kicking off our housing study for our comprehensive plan. It's something we've been working on. It's going to take about 6-7 months. We're back trying to get this comprehensive plan done. Kenneth, myself, and the building inspector are meeting with our consultant on the housing study, and we're having to pull building permit information. And just the last couple weeks, Kenneth's been mapping it, and I've been putting it in the database. I want to point out to the court, in addition to the in-family conveyances that are done, we're building a lot of houses out in the county. And in the last 10 years, 2015 to 2025, we've built, I can't even see that number, it's so small, but it's what's that, Judge? 351. So there's been 351 homes built out in the county, outside the urban service boundary, scattered all around the county, mostly in the south part of the county. And I won't go through all those because there's all the data, all the addresses Kenneth is mapping that, and our consultant needs that when we meet with her because she's going to be looking at our housing stock, bedrooms, rooms, what we need, where we built what. So we're just getting prepared. It's just a stark number that when you see that, it's shocking. We built about 600 homes in Versailles, but out in the county, we've actually built 300 plus some homes. And I'm going to finish with this and I'm done. This is the comprehensive plan, and it's up on the screen, and it's going to be hard for you all to read, so I've made a copy of it. I just want to point out. This. So, when the Planning Commission basically voted to send you guys this text amendment, they just didn't do it kind of in thin air. When the Planning Commission makes a finding, especially on a text amendment to the subregs or even a zone change, they always look back to the comprehensive plan for general guidance. And I know we've said a million times in this community, or at least I have, we're working on the comprehensive plan. We've still got a lot to go. But one thing I want to point out, the goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan are done. If you remember, we started with the goals and objectives, and this court ratified those goals and objectives on January 9th, 24. We do have to do the land use map. We do have to figure out where apartments go and where zone changes should go and where we should build subdivisions. But the goals and objectives for the current plan are in place. There are blueprint to the future. There are marching orders, for example. And the things in yellow are interesting, and I want to point some of these out because the text amendment you have in front of you is almost to the T in line with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has some directives that you all adopted, Versailles adopted, Midway adopted, and right on page 2, I want to point out, it's on the screen, but of this comprehensive plan document, the residential housing section of our goals and objectives, the second bullet literally says, encourage future residential growth to be located in the urban service boundary. It goes without saying we have an urban service boundary concept, and small communities, while discouraging residential subdivision growth that's scattered outside the urban service boundary. It's literally in our comp plan. You start to look at the number of homes that have been built, the way we're subdividing lots, and it's hard to rectify that with that goal and objective where it says basically we shouldn't be building out in the county, we should be building in the USBs. The next page deals with community facilities and services, making sure we have proper services in the county before we grow. All we got to talk about is water pressure, fire hydrants, narrow roads. Clearly, there's different parts of the county that aren't ready for the growth that is currently occurring out in the county. The next page of those goals and objectives is interesting. Again, it talks about us using the urban service concept. But on page 4 of those goals and objectives under general land development, number 3 says discourage residential development along existing county roads by maintaining road frontage requirements for new land division outside the USB and small community. In-family conveyances as they are today create landlocked 1-acre parcels. That goes right against that directive in our comprehensive plan. The proposal you have in front of you gets rid of landlocked parcels. It bumps them up a little bit in size. It is a compromise to some degree, but when you read these goals and objectives, it's hard to justify how are we creating 1-acre lots that can be landlocked or building houses on small parcels out in the county. The next page there under natural resources, again, talks about preserving agriculture in the county. The next page deals with neighborhoods and subdivisions. And again, it says that we should support strong, functional, small communities. And again, that gets why we're beefing up the A4 stuff, that we should try to encourage those small community footprints, keep their viability there. So by allowing those additional CUPs, allowing ADUs, allowing some other services, it goes right at that kind of the heart of that number 5 on page 6. And then page 7 is the domino that this all comes down to at the end of the day. We all value our agricultural properties in the county. We value our agricultural heritage and history and the industry, and we have a whole section of goals and objectives. There's actually 7 of them, and every one of those are highlighted, and I'm not even going to read them. Every one of those talk about why we have to preserve farmland, agriculture, the industry, and you're right back to when you read those goals and objectives, and you know that's our marching orders in the comp plan, it's hard to then open the zoning ordinance and say, how is it possible you cut 1-acre tracts in Woodford County? How is it possible you build 300 homes outside the urban service boundary? This is where this disconnect is. And so I point that out, Judge, because that's how the Planning Commission made their finding. They made their finding based on these compliance with these goals and objectives of the current comprehensive plan. And they sent you guys a recommendation through a unanimous vote of the Planning Commission to make these text changes to what we call the county side zones. And again, this all goes back to that in-family paragraph. That's what we talked about for 4 months last time, and I'm sure we will again. But I think when you look at the other changes in the text amendment, we're missing kind of the main function here. We're focused on the in-family, but there's a ton of stuff in those other pages that get at the heart of preserving agriculture, preserving our agricultural heritage, and making sure we don't get over our skis on the growth out in the county. I mean, again, the comprehensive plan basically says, once we get the water and you get good roads, then go build the houses. But we're building the houses before we have the water, before we have the good roads. And it all kind of dominoes if you just don't manage your growth. We got growth challenges in the city right now. We got growth challenges in the county. We're working on the comprehensive plan. We're getting ready to do a housing study. And be honest with you, trying to amend the zoning ordinance before you do that is kind of getting the cart before the horse, but that's where we're at. So the Planning Commission has sent you this text amendment for the second time. It is verbatim from what you got a year ago, except for the additional definitions and then the in-family conveyance paragraph that was reworded at your all's request. And I'll be glad to answer any questions, Judge, or I'll just sit down and let you all talk through this.
Yeah, I think let's have a discussion. I think everybody's had the opportunity to discuss with Director Hunter. Thank you for the presentation, Director Hunter. We need to have some committee discussion on that. I know that there probably are some questions. But, you know, we talked about this going on for a long time, and the fact of the matter is it's not an easy subject, and there are a lot of questions. I'd like to, I know that Squire Gill had input and leadership on the in-family conveyance side of the ordinance. Squire Gill, do you have any comments or anything to start off our discussion?
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the Planning Commission. They spent so much time on this. In the advisory committee and in regular meetings, they offered public hearings for 6 months straight. Would have been 7, but the ad didn't get put in the Woodford Sun correctly.
6, 7.
So the public had opportunity. I don't remember any subject that came before planning and zoning where the public had more opportunities to speak than this. And they thought long and hard about it. The folks on the Planning Commission have been there for years. They know this stuff. They are trying to come into compliance with their goals and objectives, like he said, which have already been done. They asked for the moratorium. We turned it down 2 years ago. And since that time, there are 65 more building permits for houses. And most of those are in the South End. And that affects my district. So I think these are good recommendations. I don't think there's a lot to think about because we've had it for almost a year. There's very little in here that has changed. So I would hope that we will move on this because every week we wait, more people are coming up to carve up small lots out in the county using various mechanisms. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Squire Gill. I'd open up the floor for other questions or comments from the committee members. Yeah, Squire Taylor, you're recognized. Committee members first. Members of the court.
Director Hunter, we had, I know in our initial conversation about what our request to the commission, one of the things was a conversation about an occupancy requirement.
Residency
Yeah,
requirement.
well, yeah, of actually no, not the residency of the owner, but of the occupant
Has to reside.
within, once it's conveyed.
Yeah, that's in that that's in that hold paragraph there.
Okay, can
let
you
me-
help me verify? I thought I had seen that previously, and I wanted to make sure I was following that correctly.
Yeah, let me get my actual document. So that's in the page that says, let me take exact page here. Should be
7.9.
7 let me double check. I think you're right. Yes, 7.9. So that's in number 5. So what it says is the primary parcel shall be held for 5 years and the conveyed parcel shall be held for at least 10 years. The occupancy challenge, the way you all worded it, is when they cut the property, it can't be occupied until a home is built. You know, the occupancy, to use the word occupancy, how do you occupy a parcel that you just cut? It may take a year to build a house. You can occupy once the house is built, but to the point of the subdivision, we got to start the clock somewhere. And the old verbiage was, it did say you had to occupy it for 5 years. In the current ordinance, it's like, how do you do that? If I subdivide 5-acre tract, I can't occupy it till I can live there. How do you occupy something? It's really, you have to own the tract, you convey it by deed, and we start the 5-year clock ticking. So we're trying to keep this simple. The whole goal is that once you convey it to somebody, they have to hold it for a period. And the idea was, well, they have to occupy it. Well, what if they don't build a house?
Well, I think that's the whole,
Because a
at
lot of
least in
times
my
they
opinion,
don't.
that's the whole part of the conversation, is whether or not someone is actually doing the thing that they say the whole intent of the conveyance is, right? If they say
That they would live there.
that they would live there,
Right.
for them to simply convey it and then not reside, not even build a home there, then that reduces the reality that they were intending to live there ever at the end of that tenure.
You've exposed the loophole we have now, the problem we have in the current ordinance. It says that something like that, but it doesn't make that happen. The problem is, in the practical world, you file a plat, you cut the lot, the parent then conveys the lot, there's a bank involved, maybe a mortgage involved, a lien involved, but then you got to build a house before you can occupy. So how do you start the clock, whether it be 5 years, 10 years, or 1 year? Do you start it with the day they move in the house? Do you start it with the day they start building the house? Or do you start it with the day they cut the property or transfer the deed? Currently, it's with the deed transfer starts the clock rolling, and it becomes a held situation and occupy. But if the goal is that every parcel that's cut gets built on, I'd agree with you, that is the goal. But unfortunately, most of the in-families we do, some get built on, some get held, and it's just a timing of when they get their house built or they get their financing or estate issues, to be honest with you. There are estate issues sometimes. So the goal was, we didn't like the word occupancy in there. And you can go back and look at the directive, but I'm not sure you guys even used it in the last draft you sent us.
I'm pretty sure we did.
Let me get yours.
And Squire Taylor, if we could, let's keep the discussion. Let's keep our questions for Steve Hunter till maybe after.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
during. We're behind time and we haven't had a lot of time to discuss. So, Squire Taylor, I'm calling you for additional comments. The one thing that I want to say is that Director Johns and our PVA, John Paul Coyle, worked on a collaboration to look at the in-family conveyances. And one thing that I will say is that a lot of the things that have been shared about this, I think Steve, Director Hunter used the term the doomsday scenario. But we need to look at what this identification of parcels and the verification of ownership have shown. And essentially, the project has not completed. There's about 400 more to do, but thank you all for the good and hard work on that. About 1,400 parcels were reviewed. From that data of the 245 in-family parcels, 170 remained in the family. 75 were sold out of the family. In November, a subset of 110 parcels were re-reviewed for specific analysis on the parent tracts. And of those 26 reviews, 18 had not sold out of the family, 8 had sold out of the family. And of the conveyed tracts, 55 had not sold out of the family, and 19 have sold out of the family. I'll submit this to the court to review. I'd summarize the work of the GIS director and our PVA. The reason I bring that up is because it's not happening in a way that the doomsday scenario is not playing out at the moment. It does not appear. I'm open for interpretation on that. The county permits that Director Hunter mentioned, yes, more of them are in the south that are in the north part of the county, but that's also because of the zoning in the north. But we're not seeing an escalation of those numbers. It's pretty steady, roughly 35 homes per year. That question to the fiscal court, I think, and to the community and to the planning commission is whether or not that is sustainable. I say that because we were presented information early on that indicated that this discussion was already reaching a peak and that things were happening in a way where land was just being developed at an extraordinary pace. The fiscal court in March asked Director Hunter to report the in-family applications. Since April through today, there have been 5. There was suggestion that number would be 50 or 500. If we're talking about a potential of 8,000 or 12,000, It's 5. That's the facts. That's how many applications for in-family conveyances that there are. I'm not saying that to downplay the pressure on the land or the development in our community. I'm saying that because I believe this discussion needs to be focused on verifiable data, information that we can rely on, not conjecture, not doomsday scenarios, not on ideas that something is happening that are not. We have to understand exactly what is happening. And that's what we're dealing with today. But the reality is, in the urban service boundary where we do want the comp plan to direct growth to, has the potential for an actual doomsday scenario. Hundreds, if not thousands, of parcels are set to be developed. Yes, in the southern part of the county, 35 homes a year may stress water infrastructure, EMS response, fire response, all of those things. We need to be cognizant of that. But I guarantee you the hundreds of permits that are going to be pulled in the urban service boundary are going to impact whether or not this community has to talk about building a new high school. Something that we can't afford and we don't need to afford to do. And my concern is that the county, in particular, because it does represent a lot of the agricultural land, that the focus is on limiting what's going on in the county while letting the uncontrolled growth in the urban service boundary happening. We are developing farms in the urban service boundary. Those are farms that I think should be protected, in my own personal opinion. But we don't have too much more time, so I don't want to go on too much. But I want to make sure that this committee and this court in particular are presented with the accurate data and information, not just anecdotes. You know, there have been abuses of the in-family conveyance policy, but it does not appear that the majority, and I would say the vast majority of in-family conveyance parcels are not being abused. Farmers are passing that land down to their family members as is provided for, and they are living on that land and they are remaining in Woodford County. I would open up the floor for other questions before I continue my part of the discussion. I don't want to cut anybody off. Yes, Squire Varner, sir.
Yeah, Judge, I agree with Squire Gill. We've took a lot of time, and the planning and zoning has took a lot of time on this, and I know we can come back and revisit this, but we as a court, we need to move on this in a timely manner here, and then we can go back and review more as we go through it. But right now, I went to 3 out of the 4 comprehensive plan meetings, and this was a subject and a title, and all 3 of that attended. And some folks wanted to see, you know, you can drive through the south end right now and you can see what's happened. It's very visible. And to protect those farms, and I'm in the agricultural industry, and I think right now we should bring this forward and move on this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Squire Varner.
I have a question.
Squire Gill, you're recognized.
Well, about this list, this is the first time I've seen this little breakdown from Kenna. These total parcels, did they start, when they started looking at these parcels, did they start at the north end and move south? How did they do that?
Yeah, go ahead, Kenneth. Briefly, if you don't mind.
Yes, Squire Gill. We had to start somewhere. We began at the top and we moved to the south. When October got here, we had to pause what we were doing because PVA Coil got bogged down with people coming in with their tax stuff, and he was really instrumental in being able to pull the deeds, looking at all the stuff. We literally took all the parcels less than 30 acres that were in the ag zone only, so it doesn't include conservation zones or anything like that, and pulled every deed and plat that they were represented on to look to see when it was created. The majority of them are created long before this. 30-acre minimum type of thing ever happened. And then after that, most of them were created through in-family conveyance. But yes, we moved from the north to the south. The 400 that we have left to do are in the south.
Thank you. And these parcels, the 245 parcels, did that include the parent tract?
We went back after the fact and looked at the parent tract once Director Hunter asked me if we had looked at the parent tract. We didn't make it through all 245. We made it through about half of those.
All right, thank you. The point is, you keep saying we need to rely on verifiable data. I think the fact that there were 65 building permits outside the urban service boundary in the last 2 years, that's verifiable data. I think 351 houses outside of the urban service boundary between January of 2015 and November of 25, that's verifiable data. We're not nobody's making this stuff. Now, he did talk about a doomsday scenario, but these 35 houses, this is contrary to the goals and objective of the comprehensive plan. And so I think, and we're talking about, there is they need to look at the city, and that's why they divided it up. The city is going to look at the density requirements that were changed in Article 7, but we are just looking at the county right now. And I think this is, the fact remains, these farms are being cut up. Doesn't matter if they've held on to the lots, they built on them, they haven't built on them. The fact is the parcels have been made. They could come in tomorrow and build on every one of those. We don't know from this list how many have houses on them. They could come in tomorrow. And the traffic on these rural roads that were meant for farming, they were not meant for high traffic, but that's what it's turning into in the county. And 351 houses in 10 years, yeah, I think that's a lot when we're supposed to be preserving farmland. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Squire Gill. Other questions or comments?
Can I say anything, Judge?
Yes, Squire Brown, you're recognized, sir.
I've heard all these numbers anywhere since we've been dealing with this. I've lived in Versailles for 78 years and I've been on court 23 years. I'm the only magistrate is on the court that's been through planning and zoning a lot. Had magistrates sue for $1 million apiece on the Baker property up there. And they sued them because they said we were wrong, but turned it down because it was in the county at the same time. All right, we got sued. They didn't get any money, and we got sued twice, and that held up. Now we're building with a new director, planning and zoning director. They're starting from Huntertown clear to the front. All these numbers I've heard anywhere from 600 to 1,200 and something, 1,750, now it's 351. We need to see them and make sure they're right, because there's no way it can be right. Because I live down there and I've been through all this, and they're not there. And what has happened to our planning and zoning, I feel our new director is not going by our planning and zoning like it was in the past. You keep talking about the acre lots. If you do an acre lot family conveyance, you got to go off 400 feet off the road. One entrance in, one entrance out. And then you can do a rural residential. You can do 15 lots. But you got to come in that same road. You got to use it. If you don't, you get like 5 or 6 lots. So what I'm seeing is happening with our new director is that you're not getting the whole truth on everything like it should be, because in 3 years or less or more, I've heard it's anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 new homes that can be built in Versailles. And the sad part of it is they've been trying for 23 years to get all that done, and he's got it done in 3 years or less or a little bit more. So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Everything that we do, we need to be sure our figures is right, because you're hurting other people. And I don't see it. I'm out there every day. So that's all I got to say about it.
Thank you, Squire Brown. Other questions or comments? Squire Gill, did you have anything additional?
I will just say that all the development that's going on in the city in the last few years, that was approved years ago, long before Steve Hunter was here. That every bit of that was approved years ago. But now the land value is so high that the development, the desire to develop that land now is increased, and that's why they're all coming out right now. It's not anything anybody did right now. Those things were approved years ago. And I think I think the fact remains that the farms are being cut up. We're supposed to try to preserve farmland. We have a 30-acre minimum. Most of the cuts are less than 30 acres, and we really need to look at that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Squire Gill.
Judge, may I say one more thing?
Yes, sir. Squire Brown, you're recognized.
If you want to check that out, what you just said, go and see the lawsuits was made on every piece of property, even the Backer property, even the Bears property.